This is Bryan Thao Worra.
Well, cheers, and let's take a toast.
Yeah.
So, what are the great questions that I can answer for you today? Yeah.
Oh, yes. So, I know you just got done with a really a road trip. You went up to Maine and other places, and you have a poetry book out. And so I'd love to hear about those and your poetry adventures.
Okay. Well, that's great. It's like, see, this has been part of the ongoing process, which is to say that in the aftermath of a pandemic, or perhaps even well before, I'd been taken on a journey that, for lack of a better term, we've called the Laoddysey. It's like, just traveling all across the United States and parts unknown, and to discover where we were as Lao refugees in the aftermath of the Vietnam War and the Civil War for Laos, which ended in 1975. And so last year in particular was the 45th anniversary, which, as we were saying to a lot of our colleagues across the way there, that for most people, I get it. It's like, that and a cup of coffee gets you a cup of coffee. It's like, what's the big deal about that? And I've got a whole big long spiel about how, if you look at it, the way that the Vietnam War was conducted, that was certainly a pivotal event for the generation then. But at the same time, I've always argued that the secret war for Laos actually really was much more influential on the way that the United States conducted affairs, where it learned how to use, say, proxy armies, how it managed to convince mountain tribes in distant nations to suddenly take up arms against a particular enemy of American policy then. And that you can see that in, say, the journey of the Kurds, or a group known as the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. And that, American history, and it's interesting talking about this on 9/11, of course, certainly demonstrates that once in a while there is that blowback, however, that when you start to try and put together these policies, then, what is that lingering legacy? In the Lao community, we are often looking at the paradox that in Minnesota, for example, we have the third largest Lao population in the country then, and out of that country of refugees, our community has produced some of the award-winning writers, artists, scholars, people who really beat the odds, because for the Lao community in the aftermath of the war, when we were resettled as refugees, even 40 years later, fewer than 13% of us managed to successfully graduate college, and fewer than 1% of us managed to actually pursue doctorates or master's degrees, in their particular fields. And bearing that in mind, Minnesota has this great success story, even as we also have to realize that Minnesota was the state that also manufactured a significant number of U.S. cluster bombs, which continue to contaminate over 30% of Laos, 45 years after the end of the conflict then. And so, these are the types of things that I'm always looking at in my collection before we remember we dream. And
do you want to repeat?
And many, and so that is my puppets interrupters, who will apparently be chiming in at different points than where they are determined to weigh in. But yes, this is really important for you to know. But it's very exciting to talk about. Let's see, how do we remember our journey, and how do we reconcile with those identities that we have? Before we remember we dream came up with with this lofty principle of, when we're suddenly resettled into the United States, refugees don't come to the United States by choice. It's like, it's often because of some kind of disaster, some kind of political emergency, social emergency at home, and that their arrival is often is a temporary process. I think historically 60% to 70% of all refugees resettled in the United States eventually, by choice, return to their former homeland.
Oh, sure, yeah, because they're either driven out or they're escaping something.
Right. It's like, it's kind of like the argument that was used to bring many of our refugees over to the United States in the early 1970s even, was based off the same principle that was used in evacuating the French out of the Battle of Dunkirk then when the Nazis were about to push the last of the French army into the sea, the British and other Allied forces evacuated them and the families that they could in order to give them that chance to fight another day then. And history has borne that out there, and we defeated Nazis for the most part.
Oh, yeah.
And let's see, and that's the same principle too, is that who knew what was going to happen in the aftermath of the conflicts then, but these were people who had stood beside the United States, and now we had a choice to make. But I don't know. So before We Remember We Dream was one of it continues in a series of several of my other books, whether it's my first collection On the Other Side of the Eye, Barrow, Tenon Sajai, or my collection Demonstra, which always includes these elements of asking, what about the refugee imagination? That we often, that it's very easy to make a mistake, particularly in America, to think, you must all just have wanted to come here to pursue the American dream. It's like, you do realize that we had dreams and ideas of the trajectory of our lives, our own ambitions, well before we came to the United States. That we weren't necessarily looking to suddenly adopt your dreams, your imagination, your myths or your folk tales or fairy tales. But we still had our own that we had to reconcile with and to share with one another. Yeah. But the other interesting challenge that came with that, with this collection that I wanted to explore, was the power of, as we came to the United States, we were a 600-year-old nation or a 600-year-old culture. We trace our roots all the way back to an ancient kingdom called Lanchan, for example, or at least most of us from Laos do. And, it's like, that was an up and down process. It really was. It's like, we had good eras, bad eras. I think we had one period where we were apparently governed by a mad queen, for example, which could be just simply, regional misogyny at its best. And she probably wasn't any more terrible than any of the other typical despots of her era here. But I'm not going to go into the sordid history about that. But, but that is the question that we have to ask ourselves, right? It's like, how can we now work with that? And as we pivot from these authoritarian models, whether it's a monarchy or a different system of government, which may or may not be living up to its ideals as a democratic republic, the question would be, as we pivot to a democracy, then what do we do with our imaginations? And that, I look back at the ancient traditions of Lao, and the general rumor, I suppose, is that the Lao were considered the eyes of their city, and they were considered to be in a particular service or an obligation, first and foremost, to the rulers of the country. Then the nobles, the king, the queen, whoever happened to be able to assert more convincingly that they were in charge. But now, it's come to this interesting point that the traditional arts, for example, the really traditional arts, of course, get a lot of support. Everyone wants to see the beautiful dancing girls. They want to hear the traditional music. They want to see the traditional plays and so on. But on the other hand, it's like the poet in particular finds himself in a particular position here of no one's holding a gun to your head to create verse, to record, to reflect, to imagine what the Lao experience can be like, even as we have this remarkable period here of we no longer have to serve just the elites. We don't no longer have to serve just the powerful. We can be a voice for everyone then. But also, what does that entail then, right? It's like, do we suddenly see a whole generation of poets then who are just committed to pandering at every single opportunity? It's like, I think back to the constant artist question for any writer, right? Which is that, do you want to be popular? Do you want to be popular in your era? Right? It's like, or have a masses asses, and that, do you want to create, it's like, do you want to have your art, do you want to be creating art dictated by a sense of mob rule, that I'll only create art with the guarantee that it will sell well, that you'll start making those J.K. Rowling numbers, those Stephen King numbers, where otherwise, I won't touch a pen without an assurance.
That's such a weird concept, because, Stephen King didn't write. I am actually reading Stephen King's On Writing currently. And,
excellent classic.
He doesn't really, he never talks about wanting to, the goals to these really great writers that have succeeded, their goals were never to be well known, to make tons of money. It was just the muse. It was the muse taking them, and that's where they went. And, it's a great feeling getting published. And Stephen King was on cloud nine when his stuff started to get picked up and he started to get paid for it. But, that was never I just kind of feel like that was never the goal. I mean, every writer I've ever read about, they worked their butts off doing whatever they could in order to support themselves being able to sit once in a while and get this stuff out.
Right. I mean, I think that's one of the things that, even as the president of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association, and as I'm working with the poets and the writers in over 19 different countries, then some of them who are only just now starting to have their emergent speculative poetry, science fiction, fantasy, horror writing tradition, particularly within poets, then this is the challenge and question then of why are we writing this? Why are we creating this? And the trick that I found is that, and it doesn't stick with all of the poets I take personally under my wing. When I see that and I acknowledge it, it's as poets we all have to find our own path. But I was particularly saying that I agree with one poet who said, if you don't have to write poetry, for heaven's sake, don't. That's but for the rest of us who are called to poetry, then it's okay, now we're going to try and share some ideas or share some principles come to it, which is to say that if you're going into the field off of a premise of this is a lucrative career, this is how you're going to just make a living, and then you're going to spend a lot, it's if you're all about the money, then you're going to spend a lot of your career very, very hungry. You're going to spend it, and it's an easy way to find yourself into a particular point of despair. And that can be healthy and that can be constructive for some people, I suppose. But I think the trick is that for poets, we have a particular luxury of the way that we're creating then is pretty close to a pure form. Then it's not completely pure there. It's we all like to get paid. Absolutely.
Sure. Oh yeah.
But the metrics for our success comes from the ability to create a culture shift. And that's the thing. It's the culture shift, the bigger picture then. And the way you might look at it, for example, is there's a certain rush, I think, when you've really coming upon a poem that also might be in just enough of a shape, enough of a model or a style that it can really transform the way other people approach writing. The most obvious example would be the classic haiku by Basho, and I don't remember the exact Japanese then, but the rough translation of it is about this frog under the moonlight that splashes into a pond. And so imagine, right, that I forget whether or not the haiku form existed before this particular haiku, and it likely did, that there were many other poets who had written haikus and that they were all kind of excited for it, right? But the popularization of Basho's particular haiku then was just enough that even today, there are well over close to 200, 300 translations in English alone of a 17-syllable poem. Then. And on top of that, it's imagine how many more then must be in Russian, in German, in Japanese itself then, responding to that. And that this particular poem was enough to spark a global love for the haiku form itself. Mm-hmm. And as a poet, how can you not be fascinated by that? How can you not be intrigued by where that takes you? I mean, this is one of those things that we often talk about it with Edgar Allan Poe, for example, as a weird writer. Yeah, I'm
wearing an Edgar Allan Poe shirt.
Exactly. I mean, so talk to me. What do you think the significance of Edgar is? Why is he so important to us?
Well, I've read some essays and stuff by him. So I've been able to delve into some of his nonfiction work. And what it brought just a different view of the world, but like it's almost like the secret view that everybody feels, but they just don't know how to express it. So I feel that that's what poetry does, is it expresses what we're feeling, because we don't know how to express it. It's like, and I feel like writers like Edgar Allan Poe and great poets, they're conduits for the universe, or the muse, or, I guess there are lots of names you can put to it, but I feel like artists are conduits to express something more profound than just this human existence. And that's a little profound.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But see, from my point of view, I think that's like, and I like Edgar's work a lot. I mean, it's like, and there's some significance to it. Some people were trying to say that it's the fact that he invented the formula story, that he really did model the idea of that you can take a certain shortcut. Then that if you just understand science, writing as a particular science, then but there's still this art to it that requires the individual writer's imagination. But it's just short of understanding. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order, as the classic writers will always point out. But he invented the formula story. But I think, to me, what resonates with me are two particular things. Was that one, Edgar, in particular, although he died in poverty. So it's like this needs to be emphasized. He did die in poverty, but he did have in America a unique conceit that you could make a living solely as a writer.
And he did for a while. Yeah.
Right, and this has driven almost all of us in America today to just say, no, it's like, we all know it's not going to be every single one of us who reaches for that.
Right.
If we are going to be able to successfully make the transition, then where we will be able to suddenly fly around our ranches in gigantic helicopters, then in our to go from one end of our property to the other with our 128 room mansion. It's like that's like, I think we all understand that's not going to happen for all of us. But that's still, there's room for these elite writers, but for all the rest of us in the B tiers, the C tiers, even all the way down to the Z tier.
Yeah.
Although that's not where I would recommend you try to stay, but we have an expansive table enough for all of us. But you don't have to suddenly be like, the only reason in America that you can be a writer is that you are the son of a wealthy rail baron, or that you are, suddenly the member of the Blue Hairs, or this particular group of people where they've been given. But no, it's like Edgar came from pretty modest stock socially, then, and he still tried his best then, and it's that social mobility then that he was wandering through with it. It's really remarkable that remember. To us, it seems every day like, like it's not necessarily the one that your parents will approve of in comparison to, are you going to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or something like that there. But they do understand writing in itself can be a career or a lifelong profession, then not just a hobby or something like that, right? So I know. So that's the first one thing. But what I think maybe for the purposes of our conversation also becomes really significant, though, is that you take it for granted, right? I think most of us don't get taught about it this way, but you have to remember the world in which Edgar Allan Poe had come into then, in that literary conversations were absolutely convinced that as far as poetry was concerned, and even arguably prose was concerned, that everything was going to be just simply based off of the European model. That any literature that came out of America could just simply be assessed by, does it fit within the French model, the Italian model, the English model of Chaucer and Shakespeare, for example. There were people who seriously believed that you could not come up with a unique American cadence then, that, it's like, at the end of the day, it all just fits into a sonnet, for example.
Sure, yeah.
So today, while many of us may roll our eyes at Once Upon a Midnight Dreary as I pondered Weak and Weary,
That was
the
a
point is,
breakthrough.
right, in fact, it's such a breakthrough that literary critics then, whether they liked the content of a poem or not, had to admire that, no, you would never, if you were in the tradition of Chaucer, if you were in the tradition of Spenser or Longfellow or any of the others that who were writing out in England, then, or perhaps, even Australia or these other English-speaking nations or something like that. That is not a rhythm and a meter pattern that you would have instantly come up with, and you can't find a precedent within it. And so, that's like, are you talking like an American? Who knows? And so, but in doing so, you may not agree that Poe created the definitive word on what the American meter was, but he opened the possibility that we could create that. And so then you look into, it goes, you can look at that as the route that allows us to see movements such as the Harlem Renaissance, the question that gets raised with Langston Hughes or Zora Neale Hurston, for example, of you have proper English, but also can you write in dialect, for example, even as you also have to kind of do that pushback against others, though, who would try to co-opt that from you. It's like, the argument being that, when you have these systems which try to assert a particular type of supremacy over you, for example, and it's like, when they're writing your dialect the way they hear you writing it, it's like, it takes on a particularly different character. Then, but and that's what's also driven me in my own work. That is the question of, all right, I came to the United States in 1973, so I've been here for a long time. But at the same time, even as I grew up familiarized with the rules of American grammar and syntax, the question was just simply, well, when do I get to break the rules? It's like, and particularly as a poet, then, that is kind of the question that we're always looking at. And I think we have a certain liberty more than prose writers in this regard of, we have the mechanics of language, we have the mechanics of the soul, even in that, a poet really doesn't have to worry too much then about necessarily breaking language.
Yeah, sure.
And it's like, because again, you see everyone else is writing so properly. Then that question is about, okay, well, look, if we have enough people writing properly, then the question is how do we write then that kind of expresses that, that kind of pushes it to the very outermost limits then, and can you still get something interesting? I mean, that's what drove me into the arts in the first place, right?
Right.
But I think about it a lot. I do, where, see, what my best mentors in college, then, were fellow students more than the actual professors. Oh, sorry, guys. It's like, I said it. I was like, but it's like, one of my best students in the English department, then just pulled me aside at one point, and he was just saying, Bryan. And I was like, it's like, I'm glad to see you taking up poetry, and it's just, you have to remember one important thing about poetry. Well, you have to remember a lot of important things about poetry, but the whole thing about what makes art wonderful is that it's the only profession that really has this deep tolerance, and in fact, this love, this need, this embrace for failure, for risk. It's like, look, and he's just going to me, and he's just, and he's just saying, look, if you screw up as a doctor, then and your patient dies on the operating table, you're going to get sued. If you screw up as a lawyer here and someone gets sent to death row, it's like, you'll never hear the end of it. Even if you're a plumber, right? It's like, right? You don't tighten the gasket to that septic system just right.
Everybody's going to know.
Right. Only in the arts can you screw up. And either you'll get another chance at it, or people may say, No, actually, this is kind of more interesting
Sure.
than what you were reaching for anyway.
Right, yeah. The mistake can be the art itself.
Right. I mean, like, I had this poem in my collection, Barrow, even, where I was mentioning there's a statue called Wind Victory, or Nike of Samothrace, right? And the whole thing is that if you go back and you look it up, I actually saw her in Paris back in 2003, and it's really wonderful. I got a lot of great pictures of it. But it occurred to me then, right? Like, wow, we really love this statue of Wind Victory then, even though she's missing arms and she's missing her head. And who knows how they got lost or where they got lost. But in fact, time and the elements, Ben, just like the classic poem Ozymandias, Ben, I am Ozymandias, kin of kins, look on my works ye mighty and despair. That a broken version of this particular artwork actually says a whole lot more. It is much more profound than if you had actually had the intact version of Wind Victory. Who knows what she looks like? Who knows what her face was like? Was she proud of, of her victory over whoever the Greeks were fighting at that particular instant? Was she despair? Was she, whatever emotion it is that's lost? Is the whole point is that no, now we have this perfect icon of a Pyrrhic victory that, you won the war, but you can't ignore the damage was done, even to yourself, right? And I think that's what should drive us all as these artists almost when we take on our themes, Ben, is that I want the students I teach, for example, to always have this confidence to put their opinions out there, but that we always have to second guess ourselves, but not be paralyzed by it, right? That Oingo Boingo by Danny Elfman.
Yeah, I love Oingo. Oh, yeah, big fan. Right. No one lives forever.
Yeah, no one lives forever. And do you remember the lyrics to The Winning Side?
Let's see. Let's have a party. There's a full moon in the sky, the hour of the world, and I don't want to die. Let's see.
The Winning Side, the lyrics I'm thinking
what was that?
is that it goes along the line of you don't ask too many questions when you're on the winning side. And that's and that's the thing that I love to go back to. And I think it was kind of like, that was one of the strange things about growing up in the 1980s in this America, then was that, that's just understanding how America approaches art so often, then without asking the real probing or penetrating questions. Like, I always thought that the hardest thing, decades later, was listening to the Republican Party taking on Bruce Springsteen's "Born in the USA" as their pride anthem. I'm born in the USA. I was like, are you actually reading the lyrics?
Right, exactly, yeah.
Right. I mean, years ago, the Republican Party had its convention in Minneapolis, Ben, and I'm not going to delve too deeply into the politics of that, but let me just say that it was a very interesting thing watching members of the party moving, dancing, swaying to the jazz band, which was doing a cover of Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On."
Oh my gosh! Oh, they don't know the words.
Right, they just thought this was the song for them. Yeah. It's kind of like, wow. And and I'm thinking like at the same thing, like as this artist, as here we are at the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis, where the entire Republican convention has amassed, to just kind of celebrate the nomination of their candidates and everything else like that. And it's kind of like, I admit there's a part of me that was kind of going like, are you sellouts? I mean, it's here you are just shilling for this. It's like for this political convention. Should we be apolitical about it? And then it's they were doing all these safe songs. And then all of a sudden it's like just as we're all about to head out, we just start playing "What's Going On."
Yeah, it almost sounds like they were, I don't know, picketing the whole thing. They're like, we're playing this, like, let's just slip this in and, show the world that we're not okay with this.
Right. Well, remember, it's a lot like when Galileo was brought before the Vatican right? And he was being told, you need to denounce your theory here that the Earth revolves around the sun, when clearly the sun revolves around the Earth. Then, and Galileo was a brilliant scientist, but he was also practical. And and I guess the historical record that I always loved, at least several accounts, seem to all agree that he did renounce his own scientific finding that the Earth revolved around the sun, except more than enough people also heard him muttering on his way out.
Yeah.
The Earth really does revolve around the sun. And
right.
It's kind of like, look, this is the truth, but it's like where we're at as a society right now. It's like I don't need to put my neck out on the line just for the principle of it's like, being right while I'm being burned at the stake is a small consolation.
Sure.
It's like several centuries later, it's like, the Vatican itself decides to say, okay, we were wrong for trying to pressure Galileo into saying that. And it's like, no, it's not often we do this, but at the time, that was our policy.
Yeah. Ignorant sods.
Absolutely.
I think as an an artist, period, whether you're a poet, a writer of stories, a painter, I think that, I think readers and onlookers want answers, but I think at the same time, art also brings up questions, and it keeps that momentum going of simply use your mind. Like, it doesn't stop here. There are no solid answers to anything, and oftentimes it should bring up more questions than answers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of our jobs to, and that kind of goes, I'm kind of going back a little bit to what you were talking about with breaking rules. Do you follow a formula or do you break the rules? I'm absolutely for breaking the rules as long as it makes sense. And I too, I dabble a little bit in the more experimental type writing. And more now than my first novel, I'm dabbling with it, and I want that question. I want my readers to think. I think it's important that art makes us think, and that whatever the art form is, that it isn't giving us all the answers.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's what drives so much of my own poetry and the thing that I keep in consideration. But I always try to pass on to emerging writers as well. There was a philosopher, I want to say his name was Vodka, and particularly keyed me on this back in the 2000s as well. And he's been passed away for many decades now, I suppose. But I came across a passage which was remarking about his particular belief then that when it came to philosophy, that a philosopher's duty was to confront the chaos, the ambiguity, the uncertainty of the world, and by extension, the cosmos and reality itself. All of that is that we have to fearlessly step forward then, and we have to confront that without being paralyzed by that. And this to me was so profound or fundamental to what it is that we do, especially as weird writers, as horror writers, as writers operating in the realms of the imagination in particular, then, is that it is very easy to create these reflections, Ben, which just tell you to give up hope. All right. And there are circumstances and situations in which you do that. But I think the fundamental question is that it is our duty to try and help our readers to navigate that.
Sure.
That was what I was working with in my fourth collection, Demonstra, from Innsmouth Free Press back in 2013 in particular, was the exploration of fear. That fear is often this irrational element, Ben, but the question is that how do we explore, how do we interrogate the fears that we shouldn't be afraid of, and yet we are.
Yeah.
The fears that we should be afraid of, absolutely, and it makes perfect sense. And sometimes we can do something about them, and sometimes we can't. And then there was also that great question of what are the things we aren't afraid of that we should be? And even more, and just probing all these possibilities, Ben, was what we want, that I think every writer really ought to try to do, Ben. But it's hard, to create these innovations. When you're a horror writer, for example, one of the questions, I think, to really make a good go at it, Ben, is how do you start looking at the world and you just say, all right, even the most mundane object, how do I make that scary?
Right.
That's my personal exercise. I always do it with my students, right? Like, okay, all right, boom. I was like, don't overthink this. All right, we have 30 seconds. How are you going to make a stop sign scary? What's the scariest way that, how can you make a stop sign scary? Try it.
Yeah.
30 seconds, clock's ticking. Make stop sign scary for me. Yes.
Oh gosh.
Like,
The paint is chipping. It's dark. The fog is gathering at the base of a wooden, splintered wooden post, and there's the ticking of rain splattering on the metal. What's out there in the dark and the fog?
Right. It's like, I mean, there's so many questions.
Put me on the spot.
and that's what life does to you. That's what being a writer does to you, right? I mean, think about it, right? Like, how many ways can you make? There's so many fascinating ways you can make a stop sign scary. Sort of like, okay, something didn't like this stop sign and utterly ripped it out and threw it into a tree. Why is the stop sign in the tree?
Yes.
Like, so it's not someplace it belongs. Yeah. Okay. Someone wrote some graffiti underneath the stop sign, Ben, but seems really cryptic. Yeah, Ben, like, stop, Sean. What? Sean? Yeah. Who the hell is Sean? Who's Sean in this? Who's Sean in this town? Right? Stop. Even just stop them. Who's them? It's like, why do you always say
or a bloodied handprint right underneath the sign?
Exactly. That's like, it's like a stop sign embedded in somebody's skull that you see on the road. Oh, there's a good one, right? It's like, or else this stop sign is okay, but didn't we pass the same stop sign?
Oh, that's a good one. That one's a good one. Are we going in circles?
Right. A stalking stop sign, or else it's like, well, yeah, it's like, are we in the time? Again, it's like, and that's what you do, right? It's like, but you have to find these great ways of taking a look at your world as a horror writer, as a weird writer, and you always ask yourself, like, how far do I want to take it? Yeah, it's like, I remember John Carpenter's classic movie, The Fog, right? It's like, if I told you that,
oh gosh,
can you imagine what a pitch meeting for that one must have been here? Like, okay, now what have you got for me? It's like, we want to make a new movie with you, John. It's like, it's like, when you're going to make scary for us. It's like, you made Halloween scary. Slam dunk. It's like, you made Assault on Precinct 13 scary. Slam dunk. What you got for me?
Fog.
Well, I got the Fog. Wow, that's not exactly my pick. It's like, what's so scary about this fog?
Yeah.
And Stephen King followed.
I was just going to say Stephen King wrote, that's actually, I can't decide which story I like better, but Stephen King had a great one of, you never actually see the things in the fog, but that's a great story.
Right. And, like John Carpenter himself is always talking about that, right? Where it's like, there's the conservative horror and then there's the liberal horror, where the conservative horror will say that the threat is external. The liberal horror will say that the threat comes within us. We are our own worst enemies. Then take 28 Days Later. Where it's a classic one of, you've got the rage virus zombies there, but what's even scarier than trying to hang out with the rage virus zombies is, but it's like your fellow human beings who think they've got it all figured out.
Yes. Yeah.
I think back to the Japanese American comic book writer Larry Hama, and who used to write the file cards for this whole toy line G.I. Joe, right? And he was just saying that, everyone thinks that Cobra is the terrorist organization that was supposed to be at the center of, the whole raison d'etre of the GI Joe Special Mission Force, and to defend human freedom. Everyone thinks that it's just cockamamie plans and stuff like that. And there's this whole range of these technocrats then who felt entitled then that they deserved to rule the world, that they could do it so much better. But one of the most important things that Larry established in creating the narrative for us, it's like forget the outlandish costumes. One of the most interesting things he said to us, that he was trying to give us warning to the children of the 1980s, was there are certain people in the world who have an absolute sense of who they are, what they deserve, and who know exactly where they're going. And they will step on anyone and anything in order to get their way to do that. And he said, those are the most dangerous people in the world.
Absolutely, yeah.
And as you look at the world of 2020 and 2021, it's hard not to argue. We probably should have paid closer attention. I'm sorry, Larry. It's like we were too distracted by the sexy librarian and the dude in the metal mask. Okay, it's like,
right.
We'll go with it. We'll go with it. It's like maybe we can catch up.
Isn't that the rub, though? Is that there have been warnings everywhere for a very long time. And now we're experiencing it and going, 1984 is a great example of, hey, everyone, look. But
I mean, with Orwell, right, and so many others, it's like, I think this is the one thing that when you're a genre writer, that it really has to hit you as, how do you modulate yourself? Or do you have a responsibility to say that no matter what I create as far as the dystopia of this horror world syndrome, then do you have a responsibility to be careful that whatever you propose will not actually, in fact, be read as an instruction manual later on down the line, rather than as a warning? It's kind of like, hello, people. It's like the surveillance state was supposed to be this is bad. This is bad. Do not go. Fine. And
look, a friend and I were talking the other night, and she's not a writer, but she is like the ultimate supporter of the art. She's a dancer and a singer and a musician and everything, but writing escapes her. But she's involved with writers, and she's involved with like NaNoWriMo, and she loves reading about just everything that has to do with writing. And she's a great person to have at my side. She's a great beta reader, but we were talking about like, just, it's incredible to think of, because I have some novels coming out, and I talk to many writers, and it's a strange thought to think like, if we're on our way out, if the human race is on its way out for whatever reason, because we know things happen, right? Things
happen.
Which, if you believe that the dinosaurs really existed, they had their end, and so, and there's this, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. There's this amazing scientific theory that, when the suns do their things, and so our sun at some point is going to explode, or whatever it's going to do. It's going to burn out, all stars do. But the length of time that it's going to take, the human race could go extinct, completely disappear from the face of this planet, because the planet will renew and just absorb or destroy everything. Not a crumble, not one little thing will be left behind. We will completely disappear, and another civilization will arise and grow and evolve to something very similar to what we are now, science and all that good stuff, before the sun dies. And it could have happened before us. Way before the dinosaurs, there could have been a civilization much like us that grew from, a microscopic cell to weird fish swimming in water to evolve into monkeys in trees, and finally humans with their science and their technology and everything. That's the cycle of the earth, could have gone through all of that and will go through all of that before the sun even dies. And so we were joking around of like, my novel is a completely fictitious, fantastical novel. And I'm like, well, wouldn't that be funny if, things get to such a point and the aliens come down and they find all these fiction books that all these writers have written, and they take it as factual factual records of what these societies were all about. And I'm like, that kind of sounds familiar of some of the texts we've taken so literally as truth.
Right. Well, I mean, I think about it that it's funny that you mentioned that, because I find myself fascinated because I work with, so much with the Lao culture and the Lao heritage, for example. But I also like to do, I feel the need that we have to provide alternate examples of history. For example, just so that you understand, this is what it would look like if a history was written from a particular perspective. And so doing some work with the steampunk community, for example, At one point I went through the trouble of putting together the timeline then how would steampunk technology emerge in Southeast Asia, but particularly through the lens of Lanshan and the Kingdom of Laos. Nice. Well, and so, which is all well and good. It's really detailed, and I'd like to think that I did some excellent research on that. Well, you can only imagine my surprise in late 2012, however, where I admit I Google myself periodically then just to make sure. It's like, all right, if I got any new mentions I don't know about, is there someone who's just being super nice and just talking about my book? I want to find out, right? I'm curious, right? To my horror, well, I don't know, right? It's like, and I talked about it to one of my friends who's an intellectual property lawyer too, and it's like, we got to go after these guys. It's like they just completely ripped off your timeline, then they put it into the into this Indonesian textbook, then or this school textbook, and I'm going like, I know technically it's like, the way I put it out there and everything else like that. I have a shaky case as it is, Ben. And I know I'm totally within my rights, dead to rights. You're like, this is a complete ripoff. I mean, it's like, it's not even funny. They didn't even bother to file off the serial numbers or anything off of a way back. Right. But I'm looking at it, I'm going, at the same time, I kind of want to meet an Indonesian student who grew up thinking like, didn't you know that in 1875, the Lao managed to get a hold of some Tesla cannons, and they drove off the colonizers, and that's why Laos has enjoyed independence for 45 years instead of getting dragged into a CIA secret. Like, that's what? No, it's like you have to go after them. No, it's like, let it stand. Let it stand. Yeah. It's just kind of like, I mean, it's like, it isn't how history worked out, but is it really harming anyone there where these school kids just grow up with a very different idea of what Laos is? Anyway, then she stopped talking to me, and I don't want to go into that whole process. It's actually just like poets. It's like, this is what I get for trying to help poets with intellectual property problems. But no. So I mean, but this is the question of choice. How do we build the opportunity for challenge? Then, right? Is that I don't know. I'm currently, one of my great concerns is that we live in this era where pretty soon, we all hear about like what the infinite number of monkeys with an infinite number of typewriters could create eventually someone is going to create the complete works of Shakespeare in chronological order, just because we have all of that. Then, right? It's like, like that somehow, just by random chance, that's possible. But where I find myself in the more practical concern is that, unfortunately, in the supposed marketplace of ideas, of course, is that pretty soon, every idea will eventually have enough evidence, enough text written to it that justifies either side of a particular argument. Then, right? And that, I don't know how we should feel about that, right? That, like, look, it's like, are you pro-U.S. intervention in World War II, or are you anti-U.S. intervention in World War II? That you'll find enough people there that can just do the mental gymnastics to argue for either case.
Right.
Right. It's like, and it's just kind of crazy, right? It's like my big worry is that I love the United States. I do. I've been here since 1973. Got naturalized during the American bicentennial. It's like, yeehaw, Ben. But at the same time, I'm not oblivious to the fact that, if I was going to have a concern about the United States, and I'm allowed, for now, what's that classic line from Starship Troopers, right? Making your own decisions is one of the last freedoms that we have. You should use that freedom. Just the same, it's just the idea that, wow, it's like the United States is really getting determined to kind of like be the last bastion for some of the world's worst ideas. Then almost everyone else has adopted universal health care.
Yeah.
We use the English system when the English don't even use the English system anymore. They converted to the metric system years ago. Germans totally agreed. Like this Nazi thing has completely got to go. We're completely banning any mention of Nazis. I don't know, like the American Nazi Party, then
freedom of speech,
right? And and it's kind of like, really, is this who we want to be as a country? Like, that eventually, it's like all the rest of the world has agreed that this rational science, this rational thinking, then it's like, rational thinking is really awesome. It's like, or maybe it's a little overrated.
Yeah. See, I like the concept of free speech, but no hate speech.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's like the, my child always lets me know what's happening in like the Netherlands and Sweden and those areas, Greenland and Iceland. And and they're like, they have freedom of speech too. You're just not allowed to. Hate speech is not protected, and I think America has seemed to miss that distinguishing between the two.
Right. And I think when you look back at it, that's why I love speculative fiction. But I think that the weird thing is that, for example, we look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for example, and a lot of Marvel comics, and I particularly take them to task then, because the question is everything simultaneously wants to be inclusive these days, but it's so defanged about its inclusion. How familiar are you with the story of Captain America, for example?
Yeah, I'm not very familiar at all. Right. I appreciate, I like independent comics. I'm not really big into like these mainstream superheroes.
Well, the truth,
it's not really my thing.
Where I bring that up is that most people don't understand. One of the most iconic images of the origins of Captain America that you will see people posting up time and time again is Captain America punching Hitler.
Oh, yeah.
What you need to remember is that when the writers at Marvel Comics were depicting Captain America punching Hitler, this was an America that had just recently had a Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden. This is an America where they had not chosen to side against Adolf Hitler. That when you saw the writers and the artists depicting Captain America punching Hitler, this was a political statement. The writers and the artists had to have police protection from LaGuardia then for several months then, just to make sure that they didn't get beaten up, killed, or worse when they went out into public. That was how controversial it was for a comic book company of all things to just say, yeah, we're making a statement that this is bullshit. This is this dude, he's bad news, and you don't want. And we as Americans, this goes against everything we stand for.
Absolutely.
Can you imagine the corporations and the media companies today if you try to put the same story forward? I mean, today we look at the celebration of Black Panther and Afrofuturism as a movie a couple of years ago, Ben. But you have to remember that when Jack Kirby and the others were creating Black Panther in the 1970s, Ben, Kirby got instructions about the covers of Black Panther, like, There aren't white people on the covers of this magazine, and if you don't put some white people on the cover of a Black Panther issue, it's not going to sell.
Right. Yeah.
So guess how Kirby decided to address the question of no white people on the cover of Black Panther?
It was Black Panther punching some white people, right?
It was Black Panther punching the Ku Klux Klansman.
Oh, that's right. It was the KKK. Yeah, kicking the KKK's ass.
Right, and so this is the question that I pose to all of us, particularly in speculative fiction, then, which is to say that it can be tough. I know it's scary, that everyone wants to kind of lock in the corporate deal. They want to get the publishing deal. They want to get the one that's approved, right? And it's like, I get it.
Absolutely, yeah.
That practicality is tantalizing then, but it's really hard. But I would say, like we're talking about Stephen King a bunch, that Stephen King just wrote what Stephen King wanted to write. But he fundamentally believed he had a good heart. That's what kind of kept him pushing forward, even as he also did his constant indictment of humanity as a whole. I mean, Stephen King novels, it's always about it. No one's completely black and white in his stories, which is as it should be.
Oh, yeah.
Like vis-a-vis flawed characters. Even as we critique the work of H.P. Lovecraft, same thing. But look, it's like, I was a horrible racist bastard. We have to admit that. But when his protagonists or his main characters get good, well, just remember, these characters were awful human beings anyway, there. So it's like, it's not a great loss there. So it's like, take it as you will. But in going through with that, this is the thing that as writers, I don't know how, poetry we're in a safer space, but even for prose, no one's going to end our careers here for sticking our necks out on the line. Sure. In prose, it's tough, right? Like, it's like if you had certain novels about glittering vampires, for example, where they really did try to do a more insightful social commentary. Where would our society be? That's the question. I mean, I just hated this one series there where it was basically talking about, the protagonist is a member of this group of outcasts or people who didn't conform to the rules of their society and stuff like that. And then when the movie came out, they all dressed alike and they all had pretty much the same pretty boy millennial haircut of whatever was in fashion. And it's kind of like, okay, it's like without naming names on the series, like, look, it's like, I admit, it's like you've made millions more than I have here, but it's like, yeah, it's like, so your big deal is that everyone in your universe who from the conformist society dresses all in white, then had this minimalist Apple iPhone style here, and yours, well, they dress in black. And I'm not saying that you can't do that. Look, it's like,
sure, yeah. I mean, it's okay. It's okay to follow rules, or whatever. It's okay to follow recipes or what's the other term for it? Formulas. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's okay to follow formulas and stuff, but I don't know. Let's be a little more interesting than that. Get paid as much as you can get paid. Yes. I'm not saying. Yeah. No, I mean, it's an interesting. Use your power.
A writer over in Los Angeles, for example, and coming out of Minneapolis, my writing aesthetic or my writing understanding, I suppose, of kind of like the unspoken rules is a little bit different there because he never wrote. He was, it's like he's on the verge of retirement. He's telling me, right, and so it's like, but he was saying that, yeah, I'm so excited. I'm writing things that I want to write here. And I couldn't believe it. Like, here's a writer where he's talking about in Los Angeles, but he always wrote to spec, that he always looked at what the call for was, and that he would write these novels, he'd write these screenplay treatments or whatever there, that just, it's like, without being cynical about it, he played them like a fiddle and he got paid or whatnot. Yeah. But he also admitted that there he was in his 60s and he really, in kind of chasing that money his whole career, he hadn't built up a body of work of what would I have written if my paycheck wasn't on the line. Yeah. and I think about that.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think about it because that's really just so alien to me. On the other hand, as a writer, where it's kind of like, no, I don't mind trying to blaze the trail. It's like, sometimes I roll the dice.
Yeah.
You just gotta roll the dice.
Well, and for me, I'm in touch with a lot of independent writers and independent publishers and stuff. Mm-hmm. What better place to be to take the chance, mm-hmm. Because a lot of us, I know I have a day job. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to lose anything if I take the chance of bending some rules, breaking some molds, mm-hmm. speaking out for minority, whatever, like let's bash political shit. Let's make some waves. We are in the perfect place to do that because many of us are willing to work to keep our day jobs, to pay the bills, and at the same time, yeah,
it's hard. I don't know. It's hard, right?
It really is. I mean, my first book, my publisher recently said something that was a little bit surprising. My first book kind of delves with I play with theological themes, mm-hmm. and sometimes it comes across a little angry, and without directly blaming or finger pointing. I play with these themes, and he was like, now that you've gotten this out of your system, you can write this epic fantasy, which I am writing, but I'm bringing in these aspects. And I was actually, that friend I mentioned earlier, Andrea Mazzarella, shout out. Mm-hmm. I was actually asking her, like, so I did this thing. I'm not gonna go into detail, but I've done these mm-hmm. little things in my novel, and I was like, is that okay? Am I? Mm-hmm. Is it too much? And she was like, no, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. Just bringing in like realistic aspects of womanhood and minorities and things like that, just kind of trying to bring in these aspects because I don't want to pretend like this is a perfect world. Yes, my books have happy endings. Yes, they're more equal societies in my stories and stuff. But at the same time, I don't want to pretend that in real life, things are unequal and these things are ignored. We pretend a lot that this doesn't exist. So trying to bring those things into a fantastical world without being contrived so, but that was the funny thing about my publisher saying, you've already gotten this out of your system. And I'm like, oh, no, I haven't. No, just prepare. We're going on. We're going on a ride. You ain't seen nothing yet. You ain't seen nothing. You have no idea what I have planned here.
I mean, I think about it a lot, believe me. It's like that, there's that classic Paul McCartney song, right? It's like, you'd think that people had enough of silly love songs. I know that isn't so. I was like, by the same way that I've tried to encourage emerging writers, for example, that, are asking me for advice, is that, look, you admire a great number of writers that you've read. That's admirable. You should read so widely that you find writers that you despise and that you find writers that you love, absolutely love. But you have to understand that you don't need to emulate those writers. You need to find yourself. You need to find the Jude voice. I need to find the Bryan voice. Then, where I try to help you oftentimes when in a workshop that I run, where I would say, look, literature is like this vast wall, okay, like that we've been writing for well over 2,000, 4,000, 6,000 years of human history, all right? And it can feel pretty confining after a while. Everyone has a night and a day. Everyone has, in most situations, 4 seasons or at least 2 seasons, right? You have seasons. You have, that everyone needs to eat. Everyone needs to drink. Everyone probably has something they're afraid of. Everything has something that they just want to love. They want the company of another person around them. They consider family. Maybe children are for them, maybe it's not. But ultimately, human beings, human beings can either go forward or they can go backward. They can go to the left. They can go to the right, diagonal, right? No, like the outer limits. We control the horizontal. We control the vertical.
Sure.
Right? Yeah, that's like, like it's this, like, it's like I'm either talking to you softly in a medium tone or an extreme tone. Like that's kind of like this physical limit. That we usually talk about. Like we have the ultraviolet spectrum, Roy G. Biv, right? That it's so hard for us to think of Lovecraft's color out of space, like this color where you don't normally have the physical capability of perceiving this color. Like don't think about your physical limitations or and all these things. Sometimes it's a small world, but there's common the things of our experience, but are in the commons, right? Like what was I remember the classic joke someone was saying like, it's a classic story of boy meets girl who turns out to be an alien loves boy, boy vaporizes alien. Just another one of those stories or something. But still, there's only so many directions. Did you love the girl? Did you love the boy? It's like, did you get the girl? You either got them or you didn't get them. And, like how many other different options? And yet, as I point out in the workshop, you'd think after all these years of writing and everything else that we've got, that we've exhausted those possibilities, but we have not. And that's where you as a writer come in. But you have to envision it, if you will, ladies and gentlemen, as like this big, vast wall of work that's come before you. And in fact, that's the important thing is, but odds are now, check yourself. I mean, I love your innovation. I love your imagination. I love your creativity. But do you really think you're the first person who thought of, I saw this really hot person then, and that hot person turned out to be whatever. That's like, vampire, werewolf, ghost. It's like, reincarnated lover, reincarnated enemy. Whatever. It's like, do you honestly believe you're the very first person to do that?
Sure.
And yet, with care, a writer, I think, starts to look into it, and they start to see, oh shit, there's like a gap in that wall there, and I can fill it. I mean, and I laugh a little bit about it because, I always tell my students to keep yourselves humble.
Yes.
You have to keep yourselves humble because, I look at my collection, the Monstra here. And it's like in the Monstra, won the 2014 Book of the Year award from the Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association. And that's great because it's like, the Monstra was like the distillation of some 10, 15 years of painstaking research and creative imagination, blending the Southeast Asian secret wars with refugee life in America, with our mythic traditions, the works of H.P. Lovecraft and so many other writers in the weird horror tradition. It's like, look, I'm freaking proud of it, all right? But I happily tell my students that as much of a great seller. It's like it was one of my best-selling books, still is one of my best-selling books. And that it was well-regarded and well-received and everything else like that. But look, ladies and gentlemen, this is a book that has also been clearly, heavily outsold by a book called Taken by the T-Rex, a big book of dinosaur erotica. Where more people would rather pay money and plunk down money for a book about imaginary, improbable, anachronistic sex with carnivorous dinosaurs than my best book of poetry, than of Lao American dystopic science fiction poetry. I get it. Yeah. I get it. But the point is that I'm not negative about it in the sense of, hey, it's like, you know what? Yeah. Like, that's what you people want. It's like the whole point is you don't know what's going to stick then. You don't know what's going to catch fire. So the question is in this time, you have to write to the very limits of your imagination, and you can't be double guessing yourself about, is this too absurd? No, it's like, just write what's deep within you. And it's like, even give voice to your silliest thoughts there. Like, we live in a world where there are more Sharknado movies than there are movies based upon the most profound works of Hemingway, or even, it's like, yeah, it's like, how many sequels to Hamlet are there, right? It's like, like just, right, just look at it that way. But, it's like, how many Police Academy movies have been made? How many James Bond movies are we still creating? And on, right? It's that, Jersey Shore got how many seasons? But like, look, it's like, I had a colleague who took me to task one day, like, and they were saying, like, Bryan, you have to stop calling out Snooki and Sarah Palin and telling your students that Snooki and Sarah Palin have more books out than they do. It's like, it's just rude. And I'm just going, but it's true. But it's true. Okay. Yeah. It's like, look, ladies and gentlemen, the bar is on the floor here. It's like, all you have to do is step over it. Like, I don't know. Right? So, it's like that. I always tell my students, like, look, I'm going to keep making books like Before We Remember, We Dream. I'm going to keep making all these wonderful collections that are exploring our diaspora and what it means as we transition from a authoritarian system to a democracy, using the best of our imagination. I'm totally going to do that, but at the same time, I admit I'm hedging my bet, and I'm just going like, yeah, you know what? I'm also going to keep some irons in the fire there and see how far I can get with this story of the girl with the T-Rex hand.
Yes.
Science couldn't save her hands, but they gave her the next best thing. And it's like, like, wait, how does that work? How does she have living T-Rex hands on her hand? Or what is the plan? It's like, I don't know, but the whole point is that, yeah, that's what she's got, and that's how she fights. How does she change her clothes? I don't know either. It's a mystery. But there she is, out fighting crime, and evildoers beware. The girl with the T-Rex hands is coming there to chomp you out. I mean, it's like, again, that's like, and that's the thing. Like, I was talking to some students the other day too about, you know what I really hate? I mean, it's like, between you, me, and our readers today here, I'll go on the record and just say, you know what I despise about the American imagination right now is that we've all become so obsessed with a particular style of world building, of consistency, of believability, Ben. Like, it's like, even in our conspiracy theories, like, look, it's like, I admit, it's like, QAnon and so on. Came really close to undermining America, and that, like, yeah, great. It's like, great. It's like, you guys, managed to nearly topple an American democracy that's close to 250 years old. Like, yeah, that takes some doing out there. Good work, guys. But just the same, I admit, I'm old-fashioned. I come from a world where conspiracy theories were really, really wonderfully, imaginatively improbable and ludicrous. I remember a time when we would say, sure, we faked the moon landing then so that the reptilians who are secretly trying to take over the Illuminati can raise the CO2 levels so that the atmosphere is hospitable to the alien overlord buddies then here. And that, yeah, you don't know which one of your favorite celebrities is actually a reptile in disguise. Now it's like, really? Your big conspiracy, the greatest ambition in America. After all of this, in the American experiment, the greatest iteration of your imagination is that there's a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C., in a particular district, which is running this horrid, it's like, look, it's like this horrid child prostitution ring for celebrities. That's it? Really?
That's all you can come up with?
That's all you can come up with? That's like, that's like, yeah, and they're just evil because they just want to be rich. Oh, come on.
No.
Like, no, this is unacceptable. America, you can imagine greater. I implore you. It's like, look, that's like, I don't mind. It's like, that's like, it's ridiculous. Have as many conspiracy theories as you want, all right? But I ask you, it's like 50 years in the United States. Yeah, I'm here. It's like, that's just, you owe it to us to give us something really, really great. That's like, like, if we're going to go around exporting some cockamamie conspiracy theory to the rest of the world, let it be something that the rest of the world can just embrace and take hold of and just say,
and enjoy.
And enjoy, right? Like, this is,
really... within that, they did come up with the Jewish space lasers. That was pretty inventive.
Right. I mean, it's like
sci-fi there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at it like, I'm looking at Dan Brown a while back there, right? Where it's like, what? It's like, the heart of a mystery or one of the parts of the things that keys you into that, this Illuminati group exists is, yes, they're writing in iambic pentameter. A what? That's like, and it's just, oh God, it's like, I mean, I admit, congratulations, Dan. You made my eyes just burn out of my sockets here as I'm reading how you're trying to describe how iambic pentameter is the obvious clue that the Illuminati are in place. Iambic pentameter, the same meter that gives you the fact that a yellow rose in Texas and Gilligan's Island can also be set to the works of Emily Dickinson. Yeah.
There you go. Oh, no.
Because I could not stop for death. That could not stop for me. I was like, I get it, Dan. Well done. Bravo. But still,
yeah.
For those of you who are emerging speculative fiction writers there, yes, I want to assure you that you can do this. You can do this and you can get paid ridiculously well. But that doesn't need to be your A-game plan.
Yeah.
All right? That's like shock us, surprise us, stupefy us. That's the important thing. I mean, it's probably apocryphal, but one of my favorite stories was about how Sharknado actually got made. And it's like, there was one account where someone was trying to convince me, and I'm not sure if they were on the level. So again, you can consider this a conspiracy theory or not, but one of the more amusing versions that I'd heard that I see some people were trying to redact was the idea that no, Asylum Pictures, who eventually make the Sharknado series, was just coming fresh off of one of their successful things, and they approached one of their well-known screenwriters, and they're just going, hey, we made enough money off of this particular movie here that we need to invest it in another one here. So you've got 2 weeks to shoot us 3 script proposals then. All right. And give us whatever you got. And we're probably going to approve one of them for production. And so this guy, I guess, he's just looking at it, he's just going, all right. And so what he had for script proposals pretty much ready to go was apparently kind of like, I've got a run-of-the-mill zombie movie then, where we've done it before, and I know how you like your zombie movies, and it's not too terrible here, and it'll be within your typical budget here. It's like it's not going to be terribly innovative, but you've done zombie movies before, and we can do this. I've got a space mercenary script idea there that's going to take a couple of new assets, and it's going to be a little bit more expensive than usual, but I kind of like it then, and it's still firmly within your wheelhouse then. But he did not have a third script then. And I guess it's like, the way someone was trying to tell me what happened to the dude was he's just looking around. It's like, oh God, it's Shark Week. And there's a tornado in the newspaper today here. And he's going, tornado, Shark Week. Okay, I'm going to create a Sharknado here. Because it's like, and he's just going like, I just need a third proposal in order to pitch it then. It's like, they're going to pick one of the other two, but I just, it's like, this is ridiculous, but I don't have time to come up with something else here. So he pitched in Sharknado.
It's really funny because in a couple weeks, I actually have one of the minds behind Sharknado coming on this show. So it's funny that you're.
Oh, good. So they can give you the real 411 about how this all came about. But see, that's like my favorite version though was just that they like a Reese's peanut butter cup. Here's Shark Week, and here's a hurricane of a tornado coming through town. And they put it together, and they didn't expect it to do anything. They didn't have a script prepared. They just put together a generic idea to kind of like fill in the blank because they didn't want to look like they didn't have an idea.
Right.
Right. And so anyway, but so guess what happened when they looked through it and they said, "Hey, we love your idea." Guess which idea they chose?
Sharknado.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how it goes. I mean, it's like, this is one of the things of why do we study poetry history, then? And it's like, are you familiar with a Roman poet named Catullus?
Catullus? No, I don't think so.
Well, it's like, Catullus.
I like to learn, though.
Well, it's like Catullus holds literary notoriety because he wrote the filthiest poem in Latin that we have on record today. You can look for the poem Catullus 23, as I recall, is the particular one in mind here. But in any case, the reason I bring Catullus up there, and that I always encourage it for any of our emerging writers, whether you're in prose or in poetry, is to understand, and it's somewhat apocryphal, but I still like the story there because of the larger lesson it imparts, is that there's an apocryphal version about why we have the works of Catullus that survive today, which are a significant number of his poems. It's not like volumes and volumes. Like, it's hard, right? You can't really print all of his poems into one collection, even though they're in the public domain, obviously. You can't print it out there because there's just not enough that, in a typical marketplace that you could make a profit off of it. But as a Roman poet, one of the interesting things about his journey that I always take to heart is, at least based off the apocryphal version, is that, remember, Catullus was not well regarded by any of his contemporaries. He did not make it into the histories of Pliny, or he was not even, he was not even thrown shade at by Marcus Aurelius or any of the classic Roman writers of his time. Then, all right, it's like that, and that's a weird thing, right? Like this is a poet, where he should have completely faded into obscurity, but he did not. Why didn't he? Because, in kind of keeping with the theme of this particular podcast, then, they say that a group of monks were moving some barrels around in the basement of their monastery, and they found a sheaf of vellum sheets in the area where you would traditionally put a wine stopper, a cork. Apparently, the people at the time when they had made this particular vintage had nothing else to use except a collection of Catullus's old poems. And that's it. Like, Brother Maynard, what do you make of this? This seems to be in Latin. Indeed, it is in Latin, and it's and it's apparently in the old Roman hand script, and it's still quite legible. Oh my! This is quite a vulgar poem here.
Oh my!
Yes, let's keep this around, and so there's no reason it's like that Catullus should have survived at all. I mean, it's like, he's competent, but it's like, but still, from that particular era and from what we know and everything else about it, it's like, it's like, and whatever do we know of his life then? Like, there's absolutely no reason he should have survived, and yet he did by the sheer whims of fate and chance. And I'm not saying that if you are interested in your literary longevity, your literary legacy, that that's how you should be trying to place your chips on it. But I am saying
right.
that don't rule it out. It's like, it's the same reason why Lovecraft survives, is that if you look at Lovecraft today, it's like, today, it's like, you've got any number of things. You can get Cthulhu slippers. You can see him appearing. Him appearing in movies with Kristen Stewart.
I see it all over your Facebook posts. Your little with your cup and your crochet little Cthulhu.
Right, and so it's like, and be that as it may, is that what's interesting is that if you look back at how he was received when he was writing, he was primarily a contributor to an old pulp fiction magazine called Weird Tales. But Weird Tales themselves, they published a lot of Lovecraft's work. Once in a while they put his name on the front cover, but he was not the writer that they were counting on to kind of like live up to this super literary legacy. But this is not, it's like, no, look, it's like everyone thought he was an overblown gaseous windbag then. And it's like, you may debate
yes. He can go on and on. He can be quite boring sometimes, actually.
Exactly. Right. It's like, I'm sorry. It's like, look, guys, okay. And so, it's like, my apologies to the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. I hold scholar status within you there, but that doesn't mean that I'm above or obliged not to criticize Lovecraft at his worst. And it's like, so all things being equal here, it's like, here's this figure where he was going to be a minor writer. But what saves him is he had a super fan. in Wisconsin of all places. Like, can you imagine if August Derleth, who went on to found, I guess Wisconsin literary history considers him one of the most prolific Wisconsin writers of the 20th century. Fascinating stuff. And even as Sandy Peterson, who created the classic Call of Cthulhu pen and paper role-playing game, also points out that August Derleth, who was making his own contributions after the Lovecraft Circle to what we refer to as the Cthulhu mythos, Sandy Peterson, who invented probably the most otherwise wide-known and popularized version of the Cthulhu mythos, would clearly point out that August did not get Lovecraft's vision of the Cthulhu mythos. Like, Lovecraft would say that the Cthulhu mythos are, the world is filled with chaos and unknowable horrors here, and everything else like that, and that good and evil have no poison. As August Derleth kind of pitted the great old ones against the elder gods, like this black and white cowboy. But it doesn't matter, because August was this super fan then who just kept so much of Lovecraft's work consistently in print and available to everyone else to read it. And it's like, eventually it's like, it's like, of all things, I would say that literary history speaking, like, there are a lot of other people, like, it's like, it's crazy about the number of people who were influenced by this man. You had Stephen King, Neil Gaiman, Jorge Luis Borges. Like, like, it's just this crazy roster of A-list fantasists, escapist writers. It's like, almost every, Stephen King, for example, when you're looking at, I was just talking to one of my roommates recently, it's like Randall Flagg is supposed to be an incarnation of one of H.P. Lovecraft's creations. Now laugh at that. It's like, what? It's like, you don't have to go there. You don't have to.
No, we don't.
You're doing it. Okay. Oh, this is what we're doing now. Okay.
That's the.
I gotcha, but it's like,
that's shocking.
Shocking. Like, Stephen King himself has to acknowledge this weird tenebrous reach of Lovecraft into his own prose. Okay, great, whatever. It's like, I have to acknowledge that's kind of what drove my 2013 collection and a couple of other poems of mine. Every like, out of habit, I just include a Lovecraftian poem in probably every one of my poetry collections, just to see who catches it, right? But trailing back. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to my rant on the middle of this Bison Grass Vodka, which is really awesome. But
yes, it is. Yeah.
But
I'm almost done.
Yeah, me too. But where I'm going with this is that you don't know how you're going to catch fire. Most often than not, the odds are what we can best assess is that don't try to do it Moneyball style. Don't try to kind of fit within the most likely statistics here and to get these odds where your longevity as a writer is going to come from kind of like hidden in the 60% to 70% mark then of what you think readers right now want to read.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the children's book, Go the F to Sleep. Well, right. It's like, Go to the F to Sleep. Then it's one of them. It's like in the 2000s. It's one of the most widely. It's right up there with A Very Hungry Caterpillar and Clifford the Big Red Dog.
Absolutely.
And all it took was Samuel L. Jackson reading. It's like reading the audiobook version of it. So I mean, just be smart about it. I mean, it's like, like, don't look for the most obscure way that you can. Again, but this is hard. I know it's scary.
Oh yeah.
That's what's great about our field. It's scary. It's that you and I and so many of our other fellow writers there. You have to take. To me, I'll tell you this: after 30 years of writing, it's like the one lesson I'm going to say. I've got all sorts of ideas about how you might succeed. But the most important thing is to just find something that you'd love to write about and you'd love to take a risk about. That when we go through this, then just be sure that it's not something that you're going to hate to write about if you have to do a follow-up. I mean, sure. Sherlock Holmes is a perfect example of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle at a certain point found Sherlock Holmes really irritated him. That's why he bumped Sherlock Holmes off and he wanted to go on to his other literary creations. Like, I know a lot of other characters besides Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
Guys, maybe,
well, and Agatha Christie did it too with Poirot. Poirot, Hercule Poirot drove her crazy. And that's why she wrote Curtain. She killed him off. And he's the most memorable character of hers. And then she went on to write Mrs. Marple and other ones. But you know, you don't know how you're going to catch fire. I think that's the kicker, right? It's the flying by the seat of your pants, being willing to fly by the seat of your pants. And I think more than anything, be willing to have the rug pulled out from under your feet.
Right. I mean, the best advice I ever saw for prose writers, for example, was that, when you hit those writer's blocks, then assess it. Like one guy was saying, like, what seems to be happening with the character? It's supposed to be an exciting murder mystery, then, but what seems to be happening? Well, to be really honest, I feel like my detective is bored in this murder mystery case. It's like, yeah, that's right. Your detective is bored. We're all bored. It's like, go with it. And so it's like, and then that's like, yeah, now go off the rails. Show us, like, how is this detective going to solve the problem? Yeah, you have a regular mundane murder mystery case here, but you're going to really improve it for all of us. It's like, just put us out of our misery and show us how the detective decides to get unboard. Then, and yeah, maybe he has to solve a murder mystery, but what's the more interesting thing that they want to focus on? Oh, yeah. Like, I forget, like, did they decide to take up British pastry cooking or something like that? I don't know. But the point is that, to me, good literature follows along particular trajectories, and then boom, it's like, but think of it this way, is that it's the Mad Max Fury Road syndrome to me. It's like, I mean, there's a bunch of other examples, like the adaptation of From Beyond is another good example. But here's how it works to me. It's like, if I told you before in this podcast, but you look at it as this big wall in which there are gaps, is that your narrative does not profit. It will almost never profit from being so formulaic then that it's easy to categorize it in something like, if you love Xanth and Myth-Adventures, then you'll love this novel. Then it's like, it's more of the same, but different.
Yes, yeah.
To me, that's not the way to place your chips. What you're looking at instead is something like Mad Max Fury Road, for example, works for me in a weird way in the sense of it's not even consistent within the established Mad Max universe. It's like, compared to The Road Warrior, the original Mad Max, and even Beyond Thunderdome, which are all different examples of cheeseball post-apocalypse in their own way. That's like, but it's that this goes into some things like, I now have the opportunity to see something that I never knew I needed or wanted to see. Mm-hmm. Like one of the classic scenes of the iconographic images that you get out of Mad Max Fury Road is, why is there a wasteland mutant in a red onesie here playing a flame-throwing guitar while taiko drummers?
That's exactly what I was envisioning before you even started to say it.
Right. It's like, that's like, because the whole thing is that this is incredibly awesome. I agree it's awesome, and there's no other narrative purpose whatsoever that could tell you that this is what you wanted to see, because you don't know that this is what you needed to see in your life there any more than a cat going, can I has cheeseburger? But, but the point is you've just delivered this incredible image then to people where it makes no narrative sense, right? Like, can you imagine, it's like if you were trying to go in a world with traditional, publishing house requirements for how solid and how rational are you doing your world building? And it's like, there's no way that you can write it and be taken seriously then, because how did it work? Like, it's like, the mutant war boys come up to Immortan Joe and they just go, Immortan Joe! And it's like, yeah, we have a mutant here. It's like, he's practically blind, but oh God, can he shred on an air guitar here? It's like, give him a red onesie and put him on bungee suspensions and put him on my most powerful taiko drum tank machine to roll through the desert, and we will ride together to Valhalla, shining.
Yeah, there you go. Witness me.
I don't know. I don't know how that conversation must have happened.
Sure.
Right. I mean, and it's kind of like this spin that I find troubling with all of our great fantasies right now, which is to say that I know, like, okay, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who have obviously tuned into this podcast and you love the weird, you love speculative fiction and speculative poetry, we all love it. I love it too here. But I'm going to suggest do not be obsessed with your consistent, coherent world building as much as you think you want to be obsessed with it. Okay, like I get it. It's pretty cool that you have fans who love your world so much that they create their Wiki Commons site there, where it's like, you know, you can find people who have just done this total deep dive into even your most minor characters or whatever. Like I get it. That's pretty cool here, but why don't we go back to kind of like remembering, like, you know what? That's like when Tolkien was doing his world building. Like, you know, the original incited incident is, of course, his collection, The Hobbit.
Yes.
The Hobbit is not an incomprehensible edition of world building. Like you can read The Hobbit.
Oh yeah.
And probably straight through, read it out, try it. You ladies should know. Try it, read it out.
I actually recently read The Hobbit.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
You can do it in one night.
I'm gonna let you continue before I put in my two cents.
No, right. No, I'm just telling you. You can read The Hobbit in one night, one sitting, okay? And it's still pretty fleshed out, right? Like, okay.
Well,
you got him introducing the hobbits, and all you need to know is that they're short little people with big furry feet, and they happen to be kind of like Epicurean hedonists. Then
they like to eat a lot.
They like to eat a lot, Ben, and that they get really put out if all of a sudden the stoner wizard with his dwarf friends suddenly starts barging into your house and really disrupting your nice tranquil life. Ben, that these guys will rise to the occasion once in a while if you try to steal the treasure of a big gigantic dragon. When Tolkien's doing this, in that version, there it's enough there that people glommed onto it, that they loved it, that they wanted more. And it's like, Tolkien heresy here. And like, Tolkien is a philologist. He's interested in language. He's interested, and he was trying to create a myth. It's like, I joke with my students that controversial as it is here, I consider kind of in a lot of ways, from a fantasy writer's perspective, I consider Tolkien a great failure. Do you know why?
Right.
Tolkien intended to create a new original mythology for England. For England, he's an Oxford Don, right? It's like he's
right. Oh yeah. He was part of writing the Oxford Dictionary.
Right. Right. And so it's like Tolkien is hanging out with C.S. Lewis, and I feel bad. Like this third writer who was a part of their group that they met in this tavern or this pub on a regular basis, Ben, and they were sharing writing with each other, right? Like, and all I remember from one account was that apparently the guy was looking through the manuscripts there that each of them had submitted, like, yeah, this is what I wrote this week. And, oh, good, C.S. It's like, this is what I wrote this week. And it's like, and the third dude is just going like, Christ, fucking elves again.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right. And it's
fucking elves.
Fucking elves. And it's
we have to hear one more story about the fucking elves. Yeah, that's a yes.
Right, and I just felt so bad.
Famous conversation.
Right. It's like, I felt bad for him because it's like, well, where are you now in comparison? Like, you had the front row seat to C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, but where's your literary output? Where's your literary thing? Right? It's again, this is what going back, keeping in theme with this week's episode of a podcast, but catching fire. It's like, you don't know what's going to catch fire, okay? No, and if you play it safe like this, like third dude did, it's like, that's like, you're going to end up like the third partner of Apple. Like, you heard about Apple, right? How it started off with Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs.
Yeah,
in
yeah, a
the
little
garage,
bit
right?
here and there.
Yeah, right. Like one of my favorite stories to the same effect is that there was a third guy who was hired on or who got brought in as the partner as the businessman. It's like, okay, I've got the tech, you've got the design, you're the business brains of this, right? And we all have basically like, I've got 30%, you've got 30%, and you've got 30%. Ben, and a couple of outstanding shares to some other folks, Ben, who are investing in my Apple computer company in this garage in California, right? And after 6 months, the business guy just said, "Guys, the balance sheets aren't looking good," and it's like, I'm just going to walk. It's like you guys can buy out my shares, okay? All right, and so it's like and he walked, and they just said, "Oh, bummer, dude. Bummer. Yeah. It's like, dirty pool. It's like, we were counting on you to help us with our account, but okay, good luck with it, right?" He went on to his own particular career in financial services and stuff like that and did a bunch of stuff there, right? And so anyway, I guess in the late 2000s, early 2010s, right, this newspaper lady caught up with him then because Apple was having one of its big anniversaries, and they were also, it's shortly after Steve Jobs' death. They just said, we're trying to get the idea of what happened with the origins of the Apple story and stuff like that. And and they got around to talking to him, and it's like, yeah. And so is it true? You just walked away after 6 months. Yeah, Ben. It's like, yeah, it's true. It's like, it's like if you had seen their balance sheets and everything else like that, from a financial analyst perspective, this was the right decision to make. Mm-hmm. And the reporter, I guess, just said something to the effect of, "Oh, that's funny, because we took the liberty of taking a look of how many shares you had at the time, then, according to Steve Wozniak, then, and adjusted for inflation, this is how much you'd be worth today." Oh. And she hands him a figure. And it's like, and he's looking at it, and you can tell he's looking at it like this financial analyst, then. And, it's like he's turning pale, but at the same time, he's just saying in the most unconvincing way possible.
Right.
It was the right decision at the time.
At the time.
At the time. And so I guess, and so as writers, for you, for me, I know it's tough. It's frustrating. Like the field is supposed to be frustrating. It's like Navy SEAL training practically. Like, all that really matters is like, can you put up with literary publishing bull? It's like, like that's just the reality of it. All right. It's like, it's just who has the tenacity to stay in the field. Mm. Then like, you remember the classic film director Ed Wood in that Tim Burton movie.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I just love to make films. Okay. Like, I don't care. It's like what it takes to make the film. I just want to make. So I'm not like, there are going to be times where your self-critic will tell you, they'll implore you, please just listen to the other people. It's like, just go ahead, compromise your vision just on this point here, just so that we can get, like, here's the bigger picture of your vision, get it made.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, it's like, you can do that for some of your stuff, get paid.
Yeah.
Get paid if you can. But at the same time, ask yourself, like, can I live with this, right? It's like, right. Have I created a character that I really despise? Ben, and that, it's like every time you do that, you have to ask yourself, and that's what I think in your creative process, even before you're looking for, like, what are the literary gaps in the wall? Ask yourself, can I create characters who pay their own way, or I'm not going to hate them and try to kick them out the door at every opportunity, Ben? Like, wow, it's like, it's just, here's Ralph the Motorcycle Mouse, Ben, where he's completely ridiculous, or Bunnicula, then, okay, but if it takes off, you're going to have to write a whole hell of a lot of sequels to that, just to keep that fancy house that you want.
Right, yeah. It's a guessing game, for certain.
It's a guessing game. Right,
well, I often wonder what's going to happen with my current novel. It's coming out in just a couple weeks. The first week of October, it will be published on ebooks and paperback, and it's the Eversteam Chronicles. And it's not mainstream publishing, but I do have an independent publisher. And I started writing it when I was 40. I'm now 46, so it's
you're aging very well there.
But I started writing it when I was 6 years ago. And when I started writing it, it was kind of a new concept. But as the years went by, and things started to emerge in television, like The Good Place, and mostly it was television that has started arising because unfortunately more people watch television than they read. But and then Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett came out. And I mean, I read that book years ago. So when that came out, I was just ecstatic. But all these things about heaven and hell and started arising. And like, as I'm almost finished with my novel, I'm trying to get it out as fast as I can. I'm like, no, I swear I had this idea 6 years ago, or 4 years ago. Yeah. And it's just weird how ideas work. And so you just really have to write what's in your heart and not pay attention to what other people are coming out with, what's making it and what's not making it. It's just, and even though I was seeing all this stuff arising, I'm like, well, I just have to continue with my idea, even if this other stuff that kind of resembles what I've been writing about is coming up. I mean, and it was like, I have to finish the story. Yeah. And that it would have been an opportune time. Like at the time, I mean, I'm not going to throw out all the ideas that were coming up at the time, but I started watching the first episode of The Good Place, for instance, and I turned it off in the middle of the episode because I was like, shit, I don't know where this is going, but if I continue to watch it, I'm going to be influenced by this because this is kind of where my story is along these lines. And so I refused to watch anything until I was done with my novel regarding heaven and hell and the aspect and the theological aspects I was dabbling with and playing with and warping, but it was just, I still, it would have been, had I been one of those people that would give up on an idea, I would have at that time, that would have been around the time I gave up on my story because, there's just so many people coming up with these other ideas of heaven and hell. And there's always going to be something that comes into your path that says, you shouldn't do this. Or you should do it this way because this is the popular way, And
right. And I mean, that's absolutely a valid concern, right? I mean, we all face that, but I think what mitigates that, what can really help us with that is, again, the commitment that if you really want to enjoy, simultaneously, you want to write to what the publishers need, and yet you have, I think back to a meeting I'd had with Neil Gaiman, where he was talking about there's a time when there's a particular writer, Joseph Campbell, who talked about the hero's journey. And like this, it's like this monomyth cycle here of how all great stories basically fall within just kind of like these classic tropes. That like, okay, you start in the mundane world, you get the call to adventure, you meet these particular figures, and so on. And I remember Neil Gaiman specifically talking to all of us, and he was just saying, like, when he was writing his story, he was just going like, oh my God, it's like, I shouldn't be reading this or something like that. Because, and he was just all freaked out because because it was really, from a craft point of view, it was really just undermining his confidence in his own storytelling, because then he was just saying, okay, what's going to get me past this is the idea that maybe he's right. Okay, maybe he's right. This is how the great stories are told or something like that. But there's a possibility he's wrong. And so he just said, so I'm just going to write the story the way I feel like the story needs to be told. And if he's right, then it doesn't matter. The way that I've written the story will just kind of conform to as much of a monomyth cycle as possible. And there might be some deviations, but it will just be a monomyth. But then he said, but if I'm wrong, then it doesn't matter anyway. Or but if it doesn't fit his monomyth, then it's like, when he's wrong, and it doesn't matter. And I can just kind of move forward there and just keep telling more stories the way I feel like telling them. And it's like, no, I mean, history has borne itself out then. And so this is the question of when you're looking at the literary theories, right? Whether it's Stephen King on writing, Jorge Luis Borges, Samuel Delany is another writer where I turn to them for some literary inspiration, like how do I write? How do I create? What's this craft process, for example? And I'm just saying, like, at the end of the day, what works. Yeah. Okay, and what really is like the most important thing to me, again, is just like I said, no, we're joking like hell about Sharknado. We're joking about, just books by Snooki and everything else that are out there, taken by the T-Rex. It's like, no, I'm telling you, it's like these are real books and that they've all sold and they found their audiences and so on. And so then the question is just, it's a little bit like that old South Park episode where Mr. Garrison has put on this horrible Thanksgiving play or something like that. And it's like, the teacher's just calling him out like, Mr. Garrison, do you really think this is what his parents and my students really want to see? Well, that's how it was.
Yeah.
And just, and where I bring this into consideration for us is that, again, it's like South Park is a global phenomenon, then using basically the essential of cardboard or the construction paper cutouts, then until they transitioned into CGI assisted construction paper cutouts there. But that's how they made this thing here. It's like, and that's the thing, right? Like that people really think that to succeed or to become this global phenomenon there, but you have to go Baroque. And I'm going like, no, it's like we're minimalist there. It's like, like you look at what was that classic one, the one cartoon, then not Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
2020. Oh geez, I know.
Yeah, right. That's like,
well, there was Samurai Jack along those lines. Right. They that was coming up around the same time, but then there was before
Strong, and Strong Bad and just all it's like Drogon and like our pop culture.
The C one. What was that? C. Oh gosh, if you're looking for me, better check under the sea. That's where you'll find me. What was that?
Right. I mean, it's like, look, space goes coast to coast.
Oh gosh.
Right. It's like,
loved that.
Right. And so, that you can repurpose trash pop culture and kind of turn it into some, that's the question almost, is that as writers, poets, prose writers, creatives, and so on, it's like, I get it. It's like you want to create these unique, individual, enduring characters, and you really want to be taken seriously by art people. But again, remember, when Stephen King's writing, you have to remember there was a time when everyone thought that Stephen King was a trash writer, and there was no way that he was going to be taught in academia. But now it's like, you can get a whole minor in Stephen King studies, for example.
Yeah. And don't forget that Stephen King, to make a living, he did laundry. I mean, he did other people's laundry. He worked in a big laundry. Don't forget those things that bring us to where we are.
Right. I mean, he wrote letters for penthouse stories to kind of cover the bills.
Yeah, he made that. Yeah, that's when magazines paid a lot more money than they do now. Yeah, right. And when those stories, and that was actually an area of the book that I just got through was, he was writing for Penthouse, and he was just writing his stories, horror stories and things like that. And then, he kind of got booted out because they were wanting more sexual stories that coincided with the magazine. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as a practical writer and for your literary career, I mean, it's like, like I said, get paid. The question is, but at the same time, right. Like I always joke with some of my students, like, I would never leave money on the barrel because I couldn't format what I'm writing into the particular form that it needs. Like, look, it's like, are you going to pay $750 for this poem if it was actually a play instead? Well, it's like, that's like, look, it's like, here it is formatted as a play. How convenient. It's like, oh, you're paying for a short story? Okay, great. It's like, well, this was a poem, but yeah, now it's very short story-esque mysteriously. Yeah. It's like, you have to do what you have to do because, again, the question is that what I would suggest that we all have to consider too is that whatever you do is that there's a part where you kind of want to play the game, but you also want to get ahead of the curve.
Right.
That the whole problem is like, it's like news and newspapers even, right? Where it's like, if it's made it into the news, then that it's been enough of a trend that people realize, oh crap, we have to write about this.
Oh yeah.
Then that's like, then it's probably too late for you as the reader. Where it's like, no, like the article has been written, it's identified how this person made their multi-million dollars or something like that. It's gotten printed, it's gotten distributed, and now it's on the newsstand for a month where you suddenly pick that magazine up off the newsstand and say, oh, this is the next topic.
Yeah.
By the time that has kind of gotten to you, it's old news. It's like, like when I went to college.
Right. We have to, and it also depends on where you live in the world. Like anything that's happening on the East Coast, I'm in Oregon. And so like anything that's happening on the East Coast, it's going to take like a year before that fad gets over here and explodes. So by the time something gets to us, if we jump on the bandwagon, we're too late. So, but I think that don't try to recreate what already exists. You can build on it, but don't try to retell the same story.
I mean, it's scary. I mean, I know it's like I remember one time there was a bookstore before it burned down in Minneapolis where I talked to one of the clerks and they were saying, but, oh yeah, what, I'm seeing a lot of solicitations for these novels that are promoting Norse punk. That
Norse punk? Oh,
Norse punk is totally.
I've never heard of that. I recently heard of Tsar punk, TZAR punk. Which is Russian steampunk, basically, Russian clockwork punk, whatever. I've never heard of Norse punk, but it doesn't surprise me.
Right. Like apparently that there were enough people who had gotten approval and had gotten novels put out. A bunch of publishers were sure that futuristic adventures where the Norse gods had come in trying to stop or usher in Ragnarok was totally going to be a thing. Right around, I want to say this conversation must have been 2011 to 2013 or something like that. And look, as a guy who's totally into my Lao imagination genre that I've helped piece together, then I'm going, what? Like, where's the room for Southeast Asian punk stories? And as I'm looking for a few stragglers that came in, like. Well, for one thing, it's like, this isn't really very punk at all, which is, I'm just going to call, I'm throwing a flag on this. This isn't punk at all here, dude. But okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. But, and it's kind of like, still, it's like, that's like, it was that thing. But, and like, this was a respected bookseller. I mean, it's like they specialized in fantasy and science fiction and horror, and mysteries here in Minneapolis. And they knew their stuff. And it's like, but they were thinking that this was going to be the next big thing, but it was not. It was kind of like, I don't want to say it was a great validation, but it's just kind of to me, but it is something that for those of us who are in the field, who are taking this at a professional level, want to kind of reach towards the professional level. Oh yeah, it's totally possible. You're wrong. I mean, in 2008, the way I called it, and I was wrong, and I'm going to say it. It's like, this is fun. It's like, it's fun being wrong sometimes. I thought we were going to run into is that 2008 was the housing crisis bubble and stuff like that.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Right.
We were stuck in that.
Housing was collapsing everywhere. And I was so sure we were going to see kind of like this resurgence of haunted house stories, of money pit stories, right? Like, didn't it make sense? Like, right, like, everyone's just, everyone, predatory lending. What if a house was the real predator? Or something? Like, okay, like, I admit it's like,
I like the money pit story.
Right. It's like, it's the haunted money pit story here. Like, Amityville Horror meets, the Tom Hanks movie. Like, I know it's like in 2008, that made total sense. Yeah. But it never came to pass. No. Right? It's like, like I look at it like, and that's the challenge of a market then that you and I and everyone has to look at then. You can't try to play a writing game that way. No. That you can't. It's like that you can't try. Like, like, I love ripped from the headlines. I love it when we call it, right, like, oh, well, it's funny that you're looking for a story like that because lo and behold, I just so happen to have a multi-million-dollar novel that I'm willing to let you have for a princely sum here of my next year, the next 3 years of my house payments all in one. It would be nice if that happened on the regular, but it is not. And we just have to appreciate that. And that's why you have to just, as a writer, you and I, we just really have to find what we love, what we specialize in, and you just have to be really very good at it. I've had a career for 30 years as a writer, based off of the premise of, I don't know how many times you're going to need a Lao American, Lovecraftian poet based in the Midwest, telling you post Laopocalypse stories. I don't know. But when that time comes, I have totally got that base covered for you. So you just come to me and I'll tell you a hell of a poem. Okay? I got you covered. It's like I had a Somali American friend who was just saying, really, that's how you want for your cards? And I'm just going, without being rude about it. It's like, I look at his career as a writer in mine, and it's like, I stand perfectly content. Sure. And, it's like, and I don't want to lord over it, but it's like, it's just kind of like that John Barrowman thing here. Like, look who's famous now, girl. Because didn't you know, poetry is also petty spelled sideways. But anyway, no.
I think that at the end of the day, your art has to feed you. I mean, like your heart. I'm not saying it might not actually feed you, but if your art doesn't speak to you and you're just trying to throw out trash that other people are going to pick up, I don't know. I think it's the difference between. My last guest and I actually talked about the difference between an artist and a performer, and it's like, if whatever you're creating doesn't feed something within you, you're not an artist, you're just a performer. There's a huge difference. And performers might really take offense to this, but it's the truth. It's like, that's what an artist is no real artist came out with anything that didn't mean something to them. It has to mean something to the creator.
Right. Well, let me try it this way too. But one of my Russian emigre friends who defected to the U.S. as an artist years and years ago, recently posted something. I wish I could find it again, but it struck with me, and I think it really hits home, right? He was arguing, you're not really an artist unless you need the First Amendment. And that's the interesting challenge. Like, I don't think he means like, 24/7, you've got to be this asshole here where everyone's trying to burn you at the stake of, I mean, look at, when you and I were going to high school and college, for example, how many times did we get a John Steinbeck novel thrown into our hands, right? And it's like, like of Mice and Men or Cannery Row or whatever, right? It's like, you have to remember is that when Steinbeck was writing, when he first got his start out, they were burning his books in America, in the public square of his hometown, because it's like, to the rest of America, like, oh yeah, this is a really funny character or something like that. But and for others, it's like, no, it's like, we know exactly which teacher you're talking about, but you're implying that she was some kind of hussy here, and this is really above the pale, John. It's like, how could you? boom, you know, it's
Sure.
right. And so it just is, it's this lesson then almost of, I'm not saying you always have to be ultra transgressive, Ben, but I'm also saying you don't have to shy away from it. And in fact, it's like, it's the question of, in America, we have these freedoms right now to challenge so many of our systems, so many of our histories, so many of our cherished myths and stuff like that. That is fundamentally what a democracy is. On the one hand, you know, as we were talking about conspiracy theories earlier too, it's like, you know, modulate that or, you know, throttle this a little bit there, which is to say, you're not looking to be the advocate for the dumbest idea there or anything else like that. It's not, you're not trying to be this race to the bottom either of like, yeah, to be the writer, it's like, I've got to be the advocate for the worst idea possible there. And then it's like, you know, pretty soon no, it's like, don't do that.
Right.
But what it is it's this question of, there's the literature, there's the art, there's the culture we have. For you and I would posit that our challenges, but what is it that we reach for?
Yeah.
All right. Ultimately, I mean, it's like, you know, I just got finished. This week we celebrated Star Trek Day a few days ago, and you know, I had a chance to visit the Ticonderoga set for Star Trek while traveling on to Maine and everything else like that, and this crazy road trip. And like, I admit, like, no, it's fascinating, like to see so much of New England, you know, for example, Stephen King country, and just, you know, like what's this geography that inspired him and inspired so many others, and, you know, passed through Lovecraft country and then into New York too, and all that. And like, I get it, you know, like it was really nice. Like I really advocate for travel, but you just need to really see the other parts of our country here to get it. But I bring up the Star Trek then because I also still think about the great question that Gene Roddenberry and so many others were asking. But towards the end of Star Trek: Next Generation, of all things, there was what I felt was the most important lesson, but still kind of resonates with me and my own mission of what I try to do with my writing, as strange as it may seem. Was that towards the end, the writers decided to bring it full circle, that the scenario of the final episode of Next Generation, season finale, the series finale, was based off of the alien entity Q, not to be confused with QAnon, but Q.
Right.
Q comes up to Picard, and Picard is first challenging what? Why are you here? We already did the trial with you. And it's like, and Q is just saying, a trial never ended after episode 1. You've still always been on trial.
Yeah.
But what he was saying was that, you know, it's like, you know, I'm paraphrasing heavily, but he was just basically saying, like, and see, what you're seeing here is that you discovered that's your real job here on the Enterprise and in the Federation and as human beings. It's not charting stars and mapping nebula. It's exploring all the possibilities of existence. Like in this particular episode, it was like, you know, like that in order to solve the problem that the Q continuum had set up for them, it's like you have to be able to operate in your distant past, in the present, and in this far-flung alternative future, then all to kind of stop this cosmic event from basically undoing the creation of the human species and stuff like that. Like, you know, I thought that was kind of like the same thing that should drive all of us as writers too. Like that should be our big takeaway almost, is that what are the possibilities of existence, Ben? Like, you know, you look into your life and the life of the people you care for most around you. Then I always tell my students, you know, I have it on one of my banners. Then that whenever I go to talk to classrooms, I always say, one of the first things I almost always say to them is, "How will you express a future that you see yourselves in?" Mm-hmm. That takes a lot of students back by surprise. Yeah. I mean, I found my long lost family out in Modesto in Merced, California, maybe about 2003. So it's getting close to 19 years ago then, right? And I had a chance in 2017 to talk to the students at the University of California Merced as their artist in residence, and I loved it. I loved coming into this classroom and talking to these kids. And one of the things that sticks with me, though, is that I wanted to talk to them about science fiction, about poetry, about the power of imagination, and everything else like that. And the students were so polite, and I get it. Like after my 2-hour lecture to them, they were just saying like, Professor Bryan, it's like, yeah, we really appreciate this here. It's like, like this is some really amazing ideas, Ben. But can I just say, it's like, I don't think most of us get it. Why are you here? Why are you talking to us? It's like we're just a bunch of farm kids out in rural Merced here. It's like, it's like, why are you taking your time to talk to us, to try to encourage us to write and to create? And I thought it was a great question, but I also instantly had the answer for them, where I said, I know you feel like this, that, in this small farm town here with its small town values and stuff like that, it's like you're 30 minutes from Modesto, 30 minutes from Fresno. It's like, this is just Central Valley culture here. It's like that your family has basically taught you your whole life. You're probably just going to either go into farming or you're going to go out into, it's like, going to move out to San Francisco or Los Angeles or some other part of the world and just really find your future out there because you think this is dead end town. Kids, I get that. But let me tell you about a young man out in Modesto. He was a young man named George. And George was the son of the owner and founder of an office furniture company in Northern California. And this guy, George's father wanted him to come join him, take his place by his side, and run this office furniture empire. But he was so determined it was going to be the future. But George had a different dream. George just wanted to run off to the academy. He wanted to run off to New York and to go to the film school with a bunch of his other friends that he'd made over the years or so in New York. Then he wanted to be a filmmaker. And it was really frustrating him out in the agrarian rural outskirts of Modesto as he looked out on the sun set and he just thought to himself, like, I'm never going to get out of this place. Right. But he did. He followed his dream and he went to New York and he took vet classes, defied his father and said, I'm not going to be a part of your office furniture legacy. And I'll never join you. And young Mr. Lucas came back. And he made this little film that some of you here in this classroom might have heard of, called Star Wars. And I'm not saying, kids, that lightning will strike twice.
No, but
no, I'm not. I can't promise you that. But I'm telling you that you also can't underestimate what kind of vision, what kind of voices, how much you can change the world from even just your rural background to agrarian roots. You may think it's a dead end, Ben, but it doesn't have to limit you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be the stop. But speaking of stops, how are we doing on time?
Oh, we are so. It is. We've been chatting for 2 hours and 26 minutes. Mm-hmm. No, and that's not counting that's when we first logged on. So, but we're around 2 hours, which it's always so amazing to me how much the time flies. But I wanted to throw in a little something there. We can't all be artists, but we can all do art. We can't all be writers, but we can all write. And does it really matter if we experience the fruition of our art? Because I think that's a big thing too for a lot of writers is, will I see the fruition of my art? Will I see success? Will I experience success? To me, it's Yeah, I mean, it's great if you do. If I experience some financial, support in all this, whatever. If people remember my name, great. But there's this idea that there's this wonderful, beautiful idea that maybe I won't see the fruition of my art. Many writers did not. I mean, the people that influence us, many like Edgar Allan Poe, many of those people did not experience their success. And I think, there's this clamoring idea that, well, if I do this or that, I'm going to experience it. It's all about the moment, right? That's what art is. It's about the moment. It's about experiencing life as it is now. And the rest, it just, and it's the farmer that plants the seed for the walnut tree. The person that plants the seed that's going to grow a walnut tree that's going to create, they never see the fruit of that tree. They're never going to taste the walnut from that tree. That's how old those trees are, right? And I kind of think of art as that, is like, we are the seed planters. We might not see the fruition.
Oh, absolutely.
And we have to be okay with that.
Exactly. I mean, it's hard. I mean, that's how my poem On a Stairway in Notre Dame worked out there, was trying to explain to my students in Laos and in America then that there was a point where strangers built stairs for us then, with the understanding that they would probably never meet the people who would need the stairs the most then. Yeah. But they took a chance. They took that risk and that gamble. And I think about my own journey as well, is that with my deepest students, the ones I keep closest to me, I always kind of caution them then too, which is to say that you can see my journey. And I consider myself deeply blessed and very fortunate to have had opportunities that almost no one else really kind of gets. Then like, if I was going to look at it, I'm going to say like, wow, Bryan, it's like, you're a full-time poet, but you weren't an English major. And it's like, you're a full-time poet, but you don't have to be, you're not a part of a college faculty. You're not on a tenure track. You're not worried that you're not going to get the next publishing deal. You're not even on the spoken word circuit. You're not, it's like, and it's all these things that were somehow, I've managed this full-time journey as a poet and as a writer and as a community builder. And that's what you too will have to look at it as. You are a community builder. You're not just you're a creator.
Right. Yeah.
And you're a community builder if you're doing it really well then. And what will help you, what will sustain you then, with your readers and your audience as they look at your novels, my poetry, whatever they decide that they want to take the time with, then what will fundamentally matter most and what is so essential to that is to just understand, I'm not creating with the idea or the understanding that I'm going to be the best word in any situation. I create with this understanding that I'm going to be as good a word as I can be, and that you will also see what's possible, and that maybe you too will add your journey, your stories to that as well. But there's this big table, ladies and gentlemen. It's not, as a contrary to American capitalism and everything else like that, like this cutthroat dog-eat-dog world that you want to think. It's such a beautiful world here that if you take the time to build community, to listen to each other, to just suddenly see you are planting seeds, you are shifting your culture to kind of like the best that you can do within your ability. And that's all right. It's a beautiful thing. Like the way that you have to look at it almost is that your reward then is that as you go through this process, it's frustrating. It's supposed to be frustrating. Like travel, it's the question of, it's not what you have, it's what are you reaching for? Yeah. And what kind of doors are you opening for one another? when I'm creating my work, it is absolutely essential. Like, look, like I've got a lot of work about the traditional myths and the future and science fiction and pop culture embedded in my poetry. But it's not to say to my fellow refugees, for example, like, and this is the only model of how you can create a successful book. It's like, for me, it's like, it's without sounding like Better Call Saul. It's like, I love this job. Okay, look, I love this job here in that I go out of my way to find the stuff that none of the rest of you are going to try and take the risk to do that, but I can. And maybe sometimes those dice come up snake eyes, and sometimes the dice come up lucky number 7. Like the point is that figure out who you are then. But it's the question of, can you find something that you're trying to write that's so urgent that as you believe in it, for example, that the world would be better for what, even if it's a dystopian horror as a warning to everyone, like that the world is going to be so much better that you believe in this, that you're going to put your own chips down on. You absolutely have to do it. And that's the thing. Like, you're always looking for the ideas where, I hate to say it, but no one but Jude is going to come up with this idea. And the horrible thing is that you may not necessarily be the final word on it.
Absolutely.
But are you a good word? Mm-hmm. And this is the thing that I really try to, I would say you and I and everyone else has to really embrace. This again, I mentioned it at the beginning of this podcast, is that what's your capacity for risk, for failure? I mean, as a woman in American publishing and me as a minority male in American publishing, for example, one of the most important liberating things you and I can both do for ourselves is to just say, our first book isn't our last. And even if you have something that kind of flops, just brush yourself off and say, it's not a career ender. I'm going back. It's like, I'm going back in here and I'm going to try it again. Right. And that's the problem that crippled so many of my fellow refugees, that I was just so traumatized. That's the thing that traumatized me was, what? You're giving up just because you had one lousy book? No, it's like we all get to have one lousy book here.
Absolutely.
Look at how, without being rude about, like, how many mediocre white males get a second chance, then, even after saying some of the most outrageous, pugnacious, reprehensible things. And it's like, that doesn't kill their careers here. No. It's like, God, look how long it took to kill off Harvey Weinstein's legacy in American art, for example, right? Yeah, so
let's do it right. Let's do it kind. Let's have some compassion and some empathy in our work. Mm-hmm. If all these people have gotten this far, basically, stepping on other people, manipulating other people,
right?
Writing crap. What glorious future do we have with this? We have empathy, we have compassion, we have understanding, and we know what crap is. Let's just rock it into space here.
Exactly. I mean, it's the whole thing is, right? Going back to a reference to George Lucas and Star Wars. Like, ultimately, you're talking about space wizards running around out there. My critique would always be that, Star Wars kind of lost track of its own narrative there, where it's like, I think the more powerful line in Star Wars was when Yoda tells Luke, it's like, wars do not make one great. And I'm going like, wow, wars may not make one great here, but apparently 40 years later here, it has demonstrated that it's extremely profitable for certain interests men who happen to like giant rodents as their mascot. It's like, okay, whatever, guys.
Yeah.
I was like, but the question is when you and I create, you're daring, you add in a voice, and you may not carry the day. But what's more important is not whether you even carry the day with what you create and what you put out into the world, but it is about what you inspire. Mm-hmm. I admit, some 375 poems out in the world later, then after a 30-year career, which sounds weird, but it's like, no, really serious. I counted up. It's weird that, like, wow, after 30 years, it's like 375 poems published in one form or another. It's like it doesn't sound like a lot to me after 3 decades, right?
Sure.
But still, bearing that in mind, that's more than most people ever dare to reach for. And I don't know. Sometimes I look at it and I look at what I create out there and I go, like, why is this poem so popular? Or, it's kind of like, wow, you guys, it's like, I'm glad you're quoting this poem left and right here, or at least the first 2 lines or something like that. But, there's a whole lot more.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah. Okay.
Right, okay. Yeah. Take it.
We don't know what's going to take up. That's the fire again. We don't know what's going to catch fire.
Yeah.
We're just the conduits. And
But the spirit of art is like Picasso said, every child begins as an artist. The question is, how do you keep them that way?
Yeah.
And the question is that, what you accept in yourself. It's like, I always tell my students, first, it's like, my student boot camp includes this whole idea of, look, you can write whatever you want. I'm not going to stop you here. It's like, follow your vision, follow your instinct, follow your, sometimes you cave into your insecurities. It's okay. I've caved into my insecurities as a writer too sometimes. And just, like this poem could have gone in a completely different direction, but I went the safe route. Boo me. But on the other hand, it's like, that's where I was at emotionally.
Right.
Right. It's like, but just the same, you have to ask yourself, right? That's like, you want to kind of overcome some of your writer's block. You want to kind of overcome your momentum as a writer. Jude, here's my number one secret. Imagine for yourself 30, 40 years from now, like let's just say we're getting close to 100 years old, and I'm sorry, it turns out that you're not going to be as immortal as you thought you were going to be. Okay? That's just rude, but that's just how it's panning out here. But you're on your deathbed. And you get a glimpse like Mr. Nobel when he saw his obituary, right? And you see that. And what you have to ask yourself is, okay, how many books are they credited to me? How many stories, how many, whatever your art form is, right? How many of those works of art are they credited to you? And are you going to be pissed off? Like, it's like you don't necessarily have to hit it, but you have to kind of. To me, I think you have to have that kind of internal number there, where you just say, "What? You only put out 5 books in your lifetime career. You only put out 100 poems after 50 years. You have committed yourself to being a poet. Like that's got to be a hell. It's always better be 50 really awesome poems." But that's it. It's like I keep my death ahead of me. Then whether or not I actually die is certainly, I suppose, a matter for debate. Then sooner, later, never. I don't know. But I have a hypothetical death projected before me, where I ask myself, like, okay, what would really piss me off in my obituary or something like that? Where, it's like, you guys, you jerks, I did a whole hell of a lot out there here, and it's like, that's like you're not even covered that.
Yeah.
It's like I'm going to haunt you from beyond the grave for this.
Well, our words will our words will definitely outlive us. And
like I said, I'm not saying like make sure that someone decides to use one of your manuscripts for wine stopper. That's not necessarily plan A.
I don't know. I think the ultimate lesson is that everything is impermanent, and even Shakespeare, every Lovecraft, all of those people that we talk about, Stephen King, even people that are still alive today, Neil Gaiman. There's going to be a moment in time where that doesn't exist anymore. So it's like, just make beauty now, make art now, live in the now. Don't worry about whether you make an impact on the world. If you're speaking from your heart, you will make an impact on people. But again, ultimately, it's like 1,000 years from now, it's not going to matter. I mean, it's not going to exist, right? So It's like this idea that we can find immortality through our art or through our words, or someone's going to remember us somewhere. Ultimately, there are people that have existed in the past that we don't remember. And just like that, there will be a future where we are not remembered. So what are you going to create now?
Right. I mean,
I probably should not have brought that up.
No.
Another subject.
Let's wrap this up for our audience here, because it's like we're getting close to
Yes,
with us for 3 hours here.
Gotta wind down.
my final wind down for you, Ben, and for all of you who've been listening to us, thank you, is just simply this. What I advise my students and what I advise peers, any poet who comes up to me, is just simply this, is that if your life track, if your literary arc starts to resemble anyone else's, then you are probably doing it wrong. Like the question is that, going back to that Star Trek episode I was mentioning and some of the other things we've been mentioning throughout this whole entire podcast, and as we look at your book and my book and everything else like that, the whole point is that even though Edgar Allan Poe tried to teach us that there is a way to create pretty consistently, to create formulaic stories and things like that that can help pay the bills and cover it all there, is that at the end of the day, as a writer and as a creator and as an artist, as a soul talking to other souls in this cosmos, and that's the deeper portion of this, as we try to connect with one another, you don't need to follow this exact path, but it should in fact look unique, that it should be memorable, that I should be able to look at where your life takes you after this, from your podcast to your novels to your future movie deals or whatever. Am I someday going to hold a Jude action figure in my hand and go, wow, this is pretty fucking badass? It's like, whatever. Okay, surprise me. And as a writer, and that's the thing too, is that, I'd love for you to be remembered for specific works that you write and create. I do. But I also want people to be encouraged and interested in your life and to be inspired as they create in their own life, to just say, oh, hey, Jude did this, Bryan did this, Tu Fu in ancient China 700 years ago did this, Shakespeare did this, Chaucer did this, Dumas did this, Anne Sexton did this, and Terry Horowitz out in Hoboken, New Jersey did that. And then they can all draw upon this great wealth of stories and things like that and just go, huh. And isn't that funny? After 6,000, 7,000, 40,000 years of human history, then there's still a path for me to do something unique, but my life journey is still something that I can bring it into my art and I can share it with others, and that 40,000 years even beyond where I am now, I might inspire someone. Like as the president of the SFPA, it's like it's horribly ambitious, and I've got to push back, and at the same time celebrations from some of my members wiping it up, right? Like our whole joke running in it is that, okay, look, when you're creating as a speculative poet, a poet who operates in science fiction, fantasy, or horror as part of your literary technique, I'm just going, but ask yourself, from the city you're in, the neighborhood you're in, the house you're in, the family you're in, what are you writing where you would send it to another star, a star we haven't even discovered yet, where, like it's incredibly lofty and ambitious, certainly, but the question is right, like, we always talk like spectral world, like what is it where in that ultimate iteration then of your writing or whatever art you choose, right? Like, why would you send that to the stars?
Right.
Why would you send, why would you say, in whatever iteration of a multiverse, a version of my work has to exist? But again, going back, don't be paralyzed by it.
Yeah.
Because this is a cosmos that says there's room enough for Sharknado, as Basho's haiku. You can be a frog splashing in a pond, or you can be a shark
in a tornado
for its life from a tornado. All right. You can be a Lao poet, or you can be this deep epic fantasy novel.
Yeah.
Whatever you've got. It's like,
It's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, as I said on Twitter this past month, then, is that we already know we live in the world already without your best work out there. All right. What you think is your best work. We already live in this world. Okay. You see what it's like.
Yeah.
I don't know if you get your best work out there, how much it will change. But if you like this world, then fine. You don't have to create another world. It's like, if you think that everyone's getting their fair share of justice, equality, they've got all the wealth they need, they have everything, if you believe that, fine. Fine, whatever. I don't personally agree with it, but you can just leave the world as it is, and you don't have to write another word. It's like, I tell all of my students, like, finish your book. Like, if you really believe this is the world that we deserve, that this is the world that, nothing better than this is all we can have. Fine, shut up. Shut the hell up, and you don't have to add in another thing.
Right.
But if you even remotely believe there's something better that's possible, even if you just want to warn us what not to do to make that better world possible. As a horror writer, whether it's the haunted stop sign, or if it's haunted stop sign, or the blink terrask, or the what is it? Sasquatch chupacabra hybrid, whatever. It's like, whatever your imagination takes you. And
keep putting it out there.
At the end of the day, you'd have nothing anymore to lose by trying to make the world better with your creations.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. So that's enough of my rant. It's like,
that's wonderful. Incredible Lao poet on your Laoddysey. Thank you very much. This has been such a pleasure talking to you.
I hope so. And again, it's like, for all of our readers, it's like, I'm easy to find online. In fact, I'm probably too easy to find online. You can message me, pin me with your questions here, and I'm absolutely there for it, because again, if you're all about the money, then you're not going to make it far as an artist. But if you're about building that better world, then come join us. And it's like, again, I thank you for getting so many perspectives out here into the world, the generosity of your time, your effort, your imagination. This is meaningful. And so I'm looking forward to your next novel. Good luck on that.
Thank you very much. You too, Bryan.
This is an incredibly big thing. I mean, it's like people think like, oh God, I've got another book out there. But no, it never gets old. It's like,
No, it never gets old.
Just trust me. It's like, 8 novels in, 8 books of poetry in, I can tell you, it's always awesome to see that some publisher has been convinced that your words are amazing enough to put out into a larger book. So people, keep an eye out for her novel. From the glimpses I've seen too, this is worth it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bryan. You have a wonderful night. This has been Titles, Talk, and Tipples. Bye-bye. And if you enjoyed this conversation between Bryan Thao Worra and I, please like and subscribe. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.